comradely disagree with the previous speaker about the methodology and how we approach the questions of religion. I believe I am uniquely qualified. I wish I was here for your next meeting, because I've twice been on trial for anti-Semitism, and I think we need to look concretely at what anti-Semitism is used for in the world today. And I'm very interested in Islamophobia, of course. But I would start off from a very different perspective. I was very impressed by Maxim Gorky, the Russian writer, and in his autobiography he describes his grandparents who go to the same Russian Orthodox church, and they kneel in the same pews and they worship whatever they worship. His grandmother, he said, was a wonderful woman. Not a sparrow fell from a tree, but Jesus didn't cry, and she was warm and warm-hearted. And his grandfather was a bit of a thug. He was very quick to take a rope with a knot in it to chastise anybody who disagreed with what he thought. They both went to the same church. They had both created different gods inside a Russian Orthodox church. And I think every human being creates their own god. I think religion, and I don't agree with talking about Islam says this and Christianity says that. Islam says nothing. Only people say things. And they delve into whatever they're able to access, whether it's a Communist Manifesto, the Bible, or the Quran, and they take from it that which they make sense to explain their world. Whether the Bedouin from 1400 years ago in the Arabian Peninsula, whether it's Oliver Cromwell and the Levellers and a revolutionary army in England that kills the king and fights its way up and down Britain and overthrows absolutism. And Christopher Hill, the great Marxist historian of the 17th century, he says it's remarkable how they trawled through the Bible to find revolutionary sentences. He said it was very meagre what they could find, but they found it. And they founded a revolutionary army that was the first one to execute the king in modern times in the whole of Europe, 150 years before the French. And they used the Bible. And they used the Bible as a revolutionary manifesto. Now, they had to ignore the genocidal stuff. They had to ignore the things that said homosexuality is an abomination. Oh, and right beside it, equally abominable, is eating shellfish. But the Christian fundamentalist Americans don't usually refer to eating shellfish, and they don't make a career out of not eating it. So you take from these books, which have been written long before you were born, you take from them that which makes sense to you to explain your world. And Islam is not a peaceful religion. It's not true. Muslims come in every shape. My mother was a Catholic, a wonderful, peaceful, generous woman, a great human being. Tony Blair's a Catholic. He should be strangled, right, slowly in a football stadium, and we should sell tickets. They're both Catholics. What does it matter that they're both Catholics? What does it matter that they say the same words? One is a murderous, horrible war criminal, and one's a peaceful, lovely human being. So if you tell me you're a Catholic today, tonight, it means nothing to me. You could be an absolute Tony Blair, or you could be a lovely human being. It tells me nothing if you say Moshe is a Jew and Abdul's a Muslim and Tony's an atheist. It means nothing. It doesn't tell. Richard Dawkins is an atheist and I'm an atheist. He's not my friend, he's not my ally. I work with a lot of Christians and Muslims, and there's a Buddhist regime in Burma at the moment, Myanmar, slaughtering Muslims. But I know Buddhists are lovely human beings. Islam says nothing. People say things and they delve into Islamic texts and they use it to either justify the public execution of poor people in Riyadh every single weekend, or they use it in order to fight for social justice. And I know many of the people who use the latter. So I disagree, comrade. Islam says nothing. Muslims say many different things. And I would recommend a fantastic wee book. The American Marxist who wrote it, I believe, later repudiated it. But it's a great book. It's called The Meek and the Militant. And essentially, it's a really quick run through the major world religions. And he shows how every single religion can be used as a force for human liberation, the Levellers and so on in 17th century England, or for oppression and brutality and genocide and everything else. The same book, the same religion, the same text can be used for one or for the other. And you'll find people using these, loyal to these texts on different sides of the class struggle. So I think that it's very important as a Marxist and as a socialist to say that people interpret texts, and they interpret them differently, radically differently in every generation. So just to give you an example, I worked in Saudi as an English teacher for a few years, and I knew a guy, a Lebanese guy, who was a lawyer, and he worked on the Committee for the Resolution of Banking Conflicts. You see, Sharia law operates in Riyadh, but only to beat up women who show their ankles, or Filipinos who have long hair. It's only poor people, only vulnerable people. It doesn't apply to princes who fly in plane loads of prostitutes and plane loads of liquor and make it a point of honour to be able to dish up good whisky because it's illegal. No, he was a member of this committee because Sharia law forbids lending money at interest, just as the Christian Bible did until the Middle Ages. You couldn't, I mean, usually you meant you burned in hell, right? You couldn't lend money at interest. That's why Jews had to do it. Christians were absolutely forbidden from doing it. It was Shylock and his ilk who filled that vacuum. Christians could not lend money for any interest, or they would burn in hell. Now tell that to the Catholics who put their money in the bank today. Of course, it's a distant memory. The thing changes. They use the same words and the same text, but it's got an entirely different content. And as I said, there are many people in America, Christian fundamentalists, who make a living from the utter abomination of homosexuality, but it is in it's in the same league for the writers of the ancient Bible as making a coat with 3 different threads or eating shellfish, right? But today that makes no sense in the USA. So religion is something that's made and remade and reshaped by different classes in society and over different periods of history. And the same formal label can have a radically different content. For example, usury, or polygamy, or the Mormons used to practice polygamy, now they're not allowed. So, I want to say a few words about Islamophobia. Muslims are the poorest people in Britain today. If you look at the statistics by every social indicator, they are poor, much poorer than the average population, much less able to climb up the social ladder. They are one of the poorest sections of British society. The figures are quite stark. 20% of Muslims, 19.9%, are in full-time work, compared to 35% of the general population. 50% live in poverty, compared to 19-20% of the general population. So most indicators of poverty, Muslims are at the bottom of the pile. Maybe Roma are a bit below them, right? And I think I would go back to Karl Marx again. Karl Marx said that he didn't say anything about Islamophobia because it wasn't a problem for him, but he did say that the fundamental weakness of the British working class, the thing that rendered the working class impotent in Britain, when you've got revolutionary waves all over Europe, you've got the Chartists, you've got tremendous upheavals of class struggle, but the thing that held them back was the Irish issue. That the working class was divided between Irish immigrants and nativist people who were anti-Irish. Those are the poisonous fumes of that are still marching with orange sashes through cities today. And I think the role of the Irish, as coming from a poor country, a colonial country, relatively poor, and the nativist reaction to that rendered the British working class impotent and unable to take power in the 19th century, or unable to challenge for power. I think Islamophobia plays the same role today. We don't need to go through the role of waves of previous immigrants, the Jews who crowded in from Eastern Europe into the East End of London, who supplied many of the shock troops for the left-wing parties like the Communist Party and various other formations. But Muslims are the latest wave. Jews, Irish again, and Muslims today, to be marginalised, to be objects of hatred and suspicion, because it's, I mean, your chair's very tolerant, so I'll not go on too long, but I think I saw a figure recently. I saw the number 8, but somebody else gave it as, I think, 24 recently. The number of people in the world who control the same wealth as half the human race, 3.5 billion. Now I remember the UN statistic from about 10 years ago, because I used to marvel at it, that 254 people you could probably cram them in here. It would be acutely uncomfortable, but you could probably get them in this room. Owned the same wealth as 3.5 billion people in the world. The inequality is so grotesque today. So grotesque. You couldn't stop anybody passing by in the street outside and say, do you think that's a good way of running society? Nobody would say yes. Nobody. Nobody who's not mentally ill. So you've got this grotesque inequality. There was a report last week, and we know that the boundaries in Glasgow between the richest and the poorest areas, there's a life expectancy difference of 10 years. But there was another report from England and Wales, much the same figure, 8.5 years difference between the richest areas of England and Wales and the poorest areas of life expectancy. So at the minute they're born, right, the one with a silver spoon and the one with a wooden spoon, this one's going to live on average 8.5 years longer. That is an amazing, extreme example of inequality. And I've been trying to look up a quote. I read it before the internet, and damn it, I can't find it. But in the 17th century, you know, Pocahontas and various other exotic colonial peoples were brought over from North America and paraded through London. And there was one other Native American leader who was brought over. And he walked around London and he marvelled and he said, why don't the poor burn the houses of the rich? He couldn't understand it, how people would live in squalor and disease, right, and short life. He said, why don't they burn the houses? Right? That was a fresh, he was thinking outside the box. He was coming from a different part of the world. But the inequality is grotesque. How do you get people to accept it? You have to get them to join with you, the rich and powerful, to hate somebody else. Right? And it was communists, it was the Reds under the bed, they're here to deprive you of all your elementary freedoms and reduce you to drab homogeneity. Life may be shit, but don't try anything, because if you try and change it, it can only get worse. That was the dominant theory. You frighten people. With the collapse of the Soviet Union, the end of that, they tried for a while to whip up a real war against drug cartels. It lasted about a year and then they gave up. And now it's Muslims. It's Islamophobia is used. The media is shocking, right? The Sun runs a story about, it's just fabrication. A Muslim mob vandalised houses that were being set aside for British heroes, soldiers. The local police chief said it's absolutely not the case. A petition had gone around the area in the weeks before against the houses because some people thought the army houses would bring down the value of the property. The Muslims didn't do it, right? There was not a shred of evidence, and the Sun retreated. Example after example after example of this, not just in the rags like the Sun and the Star and so on. Polly Toynbee in the record, but 10 years ago, be Polly, right? Labour Party Polly. I'm an Islamophobe and proud of it, right? Quote unquote. And Martin Amis, the Muslim Martin Amis, I know he's a crusty reactionary, but he's a national treasure. The Muslim community will just have to put up with the misery until it sorts itself out, right? So Islamophobia has been whipped up by the media. The Russian proverb is right, a fish rots from the head. This message is really cascading down through the Murdoch media and the governments. And I'm reminded, it's not just the Tories, you expect that from them, right? They can't do anything else. They spewed hatred of Jews, the hatred of Irish and so on, but now it's Muslims. But it was Jack Straw. I remember, you're all too young I think, but some Afghans were fleeing and hijacked an aircraft to Stansted, I think 2006 it was. And Jack Straw was on the telly right away. I want every one of these people sent back to Kabul. Now I tell you, you wouldn't send a bloody rat back to Kabul. It was devastated, it was not fit for human, and Jack Straw was quick. I want all 150 of them sent back. They all beards and Muslim, every one was a Muslim. I think 6 months later, Mugabe moved against the white farmers in Zimbabwe. Jack Straw set up a quick process for granting them naturalisation and bringing them into Britain because they were white. So, if you know the old American folk song, if you're black, get back. If you're brown, stick around. If you're white, it's all right. And that was what guided Jack Straw in much of his foreign policy. It wasn't that he personally hated Muslims. Racism isn't that. Racism isn't, it's not whether he's a, no he isn't, but it's not whether he, I don't think Theresa May, I don't know if Theresa May, and I don't care if Theresa May has an aversion to black people, I doubt it very much. I think the warlords and the people in Angola who've got millions to spend in London, I think she'll actually grovel to them. It's an institutional thing. It's the police, it's the institutions who make sure that one group in society is differentially prejudiced against. So it's the Muslims, and we have to, I think, learn from the lessons of the Irish issues in the past, because the other issue is war. If you have war and endless war and more war, the problem with the Muslims is, 3 million Muslims died in the Bengal famine of 1944, organised by Winston Churchill. So when they're bringing out a big film and he's on the side of all the buses, you don't expect the Muslims to think, that's absolutely fantastic. They have an idea that he killed 3 million people in West Bengal in 1944. Made sure that food was shipped out for the troops and nothing was left there for the ordinary people. Muslims have not been socialised in the same way as us. In the schools, they have a different perspective. Every Kenyan knows that, and most Kenyans know, the British Army marauded across the country with rape and mayhem and mass murder and atrocious tortures, and occasionally the story is told that generally 44% of British people still think the British Empire was a noble thing. I mean, for God's sake, what do they not know, right? Muslims are different, and many of them are much more resistant to that socialisation because they come from countries where it was they were the victims, they were under the iron heel, and therefore they have to be de-radicalised. I'll finish by saying this, Chair, because you're too polite to say shut up and sit down and stop.
I'm going to be talk forever.
You're too polite. I was at Napier University and I went to a Prevent meeting, and the guy there was talking about Prevent and how, there was 2 cops there. The only time I've been to a meeting with cops for a very long time. And he was talking about, stopping radicalisation. I said, hello, I'm a radical. It's too late. I believe in radicalisation. Radical means get to the root of an issue. Deal with the root, don't deal with the symptoms. A doctor doesn't paint over the measles, the spots. He tries to discover what causes the measles, get to the root of it, and give you a medicine. We live in poverty and racism and terrorism and war. I believe in radicalism. I believe in looking at the root of it, trying to find the cause and deal with the cause, not just the symptoms. Not a band-aid over a wound, but who's actually selling the weapons. And I spoke to the Muslim guy who was actually doing it afterwards, and he was shamefaced, right? But he was getting loads of money. Loads of money. The government a few years ago was throwing money at Muslims who would stand up and deal with de-radicalisation. And the whole point of the de-radicalisation is, you can be accepted into British society, but don't oppose the war in Iraq. Don't get really in a rage when you see other Muslims being butchered and murdered and slaughtered, and the British government supplying Saudi Arabia to drop huge chunks of high explosive all over the Yemen and cause a humanitarian catastrophe. Don't look at the television and get angry. We're British, we're calm, you're going to be de-radicalised. You just have to say that's a good thing, and then you can be a really good citizen. So we have to oppose it. It's a form of thought policing. It's very much aimed at Muslims. They've begun because a lot of Brits, a few Nazis have been found planning bombing stuff in Britain recently. They've started to shift the balance a little bit, but for years they ignored the rise of the extreme right in Britain and focused disproportionately on Muslims. And the notion that Muslims have to speak up every time a couple of guys who are Muslims carry out a bombing, well, when do Christians have to do that? Whenever a Christian is found in America to be slaughtering people in a church or in a Las Vegas square. So I'll finish by saying, I did rip up my speech, I think religion is the opium of the people, but Marx's lovely phrase deserves to be taken that step further. He says it's not just the opium of the people, it's the heart of heartless conditions. It's the cry of the oppressed creature. It's the heart of a heartless world. And if somebody's needing a crutch, you'd have to be a swine to take it away from them. We are not against religion in that sense, and if somebody finds solace in a way of looking at the world through religion, then who are we to say no? Religious people are not our enemies, and atheists like Dawkins and co are certainly not our friends. So I think a Marxist view of religion is very concrete. You look at what people are saying, you look beneath the surface, if they're atheist or religious or Buddhist, what are they actually saying about human emancipation? Do they want to struggle for human freedom? Do they think the workers should inherit the world? Do they think the parasites should be deposed? In that case, I don't care how they come to that conclusion. Their ethical system. I'll discuss Marxism over Buddhism or bloody Catholicism any day of the week, but it's secondary to what they actually do. And as a socialist, we're much more concerned with what people do than some of the baggage that they have in their head. The Americans, you know, that phrase by Gramsci, when I first heard it, I thought it was a fascist thing. Pessimism of the intellect, optimism of the will, right? And all sorts of ponces say that all the time, you know, very intellectual. The Americans have got a lovely translation. Get your arse into gear and your brain will follow, right? Start struggling, start working, start trying to change the world, and in the course of struggling together, we will deal with issues like, is there a God? Is the world 6,000 years old? And science with science on our side, we can begin to win a worldview that is congenial to Marxism. So, thanks for
that. Again, with the open floor for any questions or comments. We'll get Bill first.
Aye, thanks, Mick. That was great. Early on, you were talking there about Islam says nothing, people say things, and I was reminded of the saying, you know, guns don't kill people, people kill people. So I'm taking what you said and just twisting it around for you. Mick, I wonder about the Muslims being the poorest sector in the UK. I wonder if that obviously is the UK as a whole, whereas in Scotland with a much smaller population proportion-wise, and a lot of the Muslim community self-employed. I wonder if that's the same in Scotland. I wonder if that's, I don't know how relevant that is. Then moved on to identity politics, basically. There's always this argument that I hear within socialist media about identity politics. And I think when you spoke about how the ruling classes divide and find a scapegoat, whether it's the Irish or the Polish or the Muslims, I think that's a strong argument for an inclusive movement that attempts to recruit all these groups. And if I'm told often, because I'm not a very good, well-learned socialist, I'm told very often that the essence of socialism is concentrating purely and exclusively on the working class. And I can see the attraction to that. But I think what Mick just said there about creating scapegoats gives a very convincing argument. To not worry too much about identity politics and to think more about inclusiveness, inclusion. And I think that was it. I scribbled something else down here. Oh, aye, that was it. I already mentioned it. Polish people, of course. There are co-scapegoats along with Islam. It's Polish people we see. And then the last thing there was integration of immigrants, and something I feel very strongly about. You spoke about how to be a good Muslim and you'll be accepted if you don't complain about the war in Iraq or you don't complain about different things. There's a wider question there as well. There's this kind of generally accepted thing that when immigrants come here, when people come here, the expats or immigrants or refugees or migrants or whatever you want to call them, people should integrate. They should learn English. They should adopt the British way of life, whatever that is. And I call bullshit on that. If my neighbour doesn't speak English, what I require from my neighbour? Obey the law, pay the tax, keep the music down, don't let your dog shit in my grass, because that's where I hang out my washing. And after that, I don't give a flying fuck. If you want to wear a gala bear, if you want to wear African traditional dress, if you want to speak exclusively in your own language, if you want to practice your own religion, again, as long as you do it quietly, it's fine by me. But it sounds like such a sensible thing to say. Oh, you just integrate, it'll be grand, you know? Who'd want to become like us? Who'd want to become like an imperialist Britain? That's a dreadful idea.
I'll just say before I let Nick respond, on the identity politics stand, while it's true that Marxism absolutely requires a class analysis, I said on Facebook at one point that if your political doctrine doesn't have class analysis, throw it away and start again. You've done it wrong. But it is fundamentally anti-Marxist to ignore the fact that the divisive nature of the ruling class. Because the fact is the ruling class divides us by our gender, by our sexuality, our religion, our disabilities and our race. So IDPOL is Marxist, it's fundamentally socialist and is important for an inclusive movement. But Mick, I'll let you respond as well to those points.
What, the Bill's 17 questions?
Yes.
So this is the beginning of a series. No, very good points that Bill makes, of course.
Please.
I think there's a distinction between oppression and exploitation. Workers who are workers in car factories, workers in places where there's masses of profit pumped out of them, are exploited. They work and they pass up a lot of wealth to people who live in Bermuda, or who, I think Jeff Bezos is now worth 125 billion. It's an eighth of a trillion. An eighth of a trillion.
The first zillionaire.
Could be. So obviously he is exploiting, sucking wealth out of the labour of a large army of people. They are exploited and they keep him on, they support, they contribute to capital accumulation. A small shopkeeper might have a crap life. He's not a worker, he owns his wee shop, he tries to stick as much as he can on the goods as possible, enough to make as good a living as possible. He's exploiting in some ways the people that are passing by. But he could have a shit life, he could be oppressed, he could be living in the margins. I think obviously people are oppressed for their sexuality in a world like this. They're oppressed for their colour, for their religion, for many of their characteristics. Women are oppressed in terms of not having equal wages with men. And I think a socialist party, and you might think, shameless bugger, you're actually not in one, so who are you to come to a socialist group and suggest? But I think it's fundamental for socialists that you understand the power of the organised working class whenever they understand it themselves, that they can shake the world, the volcano can tremble. But you also have to think about the people who are poor, the people who don't have that power, right? Who may be homeless, might be sleeping in the streets. You might write them off as, we don't, some write them off as human beings. But they need to be brought into the struggle as well. I'm not saying it's easy, it's bloody hard. And therefore the people with the power have to fight for those who don't have that kind of power. They have to fight for the people who have been put into detention centres and sent back to the Congo or somewhere else, right? Who are brutally treated by this foul regime. Because we need allies, the working class needs allies in order to fight our bosses. And I think therein lies the dynamic of a socialist party, that we have to be the best fighters on behalf of the oppressed. We have to take into our workplaces, take into where we have any influence, the defence of Muslims who have been demonised, the defence of people who have been bullied because they're gay or whatever, right? Funny about obey the law. You want your neighbours to obey the law. When did you become a bloody conservative law? You choose the laws you obey.
The laws that inconvenience me.
Exactly. You choose the laws. As socialists, I think it's a good idea to drive on the left and stop at traffic lights. I hope you do it, because I'm sharing the road with you. Those laws I respect. They're good. And Bill offered me a drink tonight, not knowing I was driving. There was a time when I used to drink and drive, and a lot of other people did, and I'm not proud of it at all. I think the laws that have come down on drunk driving and drink driving is a good law, and I would enforce it, and I would shame any of you who starts drinking and driving, because it could be my kids. Some laws are good. Other laws, break them, right? Break them, smash them, find every opportunity to challenge them. So I don't want immigrants to obey all the laws. I want them to integrate. But integrate into what? It's undialectical. We stand here. You will integrate with me. No. I will continue to eat cabbage, and you will come over from India and you'll start eating cabbage and very poor food that working class people here use. No, you change us. When immigrants come, they change the world that they enter, often for the better. We are enriched by it, right? Enriched by it in a multitude of different ways. I mean, I grew up in Glasgow with the arse hanging out our trousers, right? In Pollock, plastic shoes. I think we exploited about 5-6 foodstuffs. was sausages, there was a pie, and you had carrots, peas, turnip, and that was about it. Potatoes, of course. And then these guys came from somewhere else, and you could smell the food, the curry. A restaurant opened up in Jamaica Street, and it was, oh, I'm going up there to try it. It completely enriched our life, right? You go to a supermarket now, and there's 30,000 foodstuffs to choose from. The grocers, there used to be 5. So, of course, we don't want them to integrate into the established order. We wish to overthrow the established order, and we wish them to be our allies in doing so. But as socialists, we want the best of every culture. If some Muslims come here and bring polygamy, sorry, come in. Polygamy is out of order. It's, if you want to be even and say, you know, women should have 4 husbands as well, that's fine, we'll talk about it. Bizarre, but we can discuss it. But if you want to put up a defence of polygamy, that is illegal, and I support the illegality of that. So I don't want to use the state to do it, but I want to integrate the best of all cultures. I think that's what socialists do. We don't defend this one that we grew up in by accident. We want to take the best of everything. That would be my view of integrating that. I answered maybe 3 out of 17.
Just on the subject of the law, there was a famous socialist who said, one has a moral responsibility to disobey unjust laws. His name was Martin Luther King, I'm sure you've heard him. Lisa, were you trying to join?
Yeah. So when you finish, no.
No, that was it.
Yeah, I agree absolutely with you with that if you have to have the class analysis there, otherwise you forget. Throw your party politics out. You have to have the class analysis there. But you are right. In what you said. No, sorry, I've got a number of points here. I don't think.
You got 80.
No. Just a few. Right. On the law, it depends what we're talking about. Law. When you talk about Sharia law and so on, you probably are. I think you probably are talking about something that isn't, that should and shouldn't be part of a national law anyway. As I say, the only law I think of is human rights, you know. Like, goodness me, I wouldn't like to live next door to this one. There's all sorts of rules in it.
Don't shit on my grass.
However, the vast majority of cases when people break the law, in the world, when people break the law, they're actually not breaking the law because they choose to. They're breaking the law because they have to. It's simple self-defence. It doesn't matter whether you're on a picket line and being hauled off, as we saw, as those of us who were around during the miners' strike, which I know you weren't, Sam. And you know, or if you are simply trying to defend yourself in one of these occupied territories currently occupied by Israel, or many other parts of the world, you're told you're breaking the law. You're actually defending yourself. There are others who choose to break an unwritten law, and I was fascinated. I know Mick's got a comment on this. Recently, in fact at the weekend, I think there were thousands of people in Israel who were marching against the government trying to repatriate the Somali asylum seekers. They're seeking to repatriate them. You know, that actually goes. There was a petition from Holocaust survivors. I presume that most of them would be the children of Holocaust, but they're still survivors of the Holocaust, who wrote a petition to the government saying, "Do not repatriate these people." So good can come out of that. I mean, in a way, that goes against the principles of Zionism and so on, but these are good people who do that. So they've actually broken an unwritten law in that way. I won't go on anymore.
Extreme Muslims, but I would wonder if you could say something about extreme Zionists in Israel. We don't hear much about that on the news, you know. And I mean, I find myself, when I try to look into it, I don't learn a lot. You just hear a few things on the side. And I wonder if you could say something about this extreme Zionist religion, call it that exists in Israel. And some of the facets of it, and secondly, why we hear so little of it.
Put it back in that.
Yes,
Oh,
absolutely.
thank you. I think it's, once again, the objective circumstances in which these genocidal ideas develop is settler colonialism. That settlers come from Europe, displace the natives, kill large numbers of them, repeatedly kill large numbers of them, because that's the only way you can drive people off their land. History's not discovered any other one. And I would start off by saying Israel's nothing special. It's got a built-in tendency to genocide. But every settler colonial project has a built-in tendency to genocide. It can be realised in mass murder, Argentina, Tasmania, Australia and so on, and North America, or it can take a different form, but there's always a tendency to genocidal violence, and that's what we're seeing in Israel today. The atheists who founded Israel were no slouches at ethnic cleansing and mass murder. Ben Gurion was an atheist, most of the founding fathers were. They despised religious Jews by and large and thought they were inferior, subhuman, and could only really become human by going to Israel. Too many lawyers, too many financiers, not enough carpenters and plumbers and farmers and so on. So they wanted to, they looked at, they were very anti-Semitic, the early Zionists. They looked at European Jewish social structure and thought it was deformed, diseased. Even to this day, when Jews go to Israel, it's called Aliyah, rising up, right, because they're coming from a lower level. So that's the basis of this anti-Semitic ideology called Zionism. It's filled with hostility towards European Jews. In fact, when they had their first conference in Basel, I think it was, the rabbi kicked them out. Said, "You're bloody anti-Semites, we don't want you. We quite like living in Switzerland." So the violence today is very extreme indeed. You may have heard of a young woman, I met her in Beirut last year, called Ahid Tamimi, who was 16 and slapped a soldier, and she's been locked up. And the Minister for Defence said he hopes, she turned 17 a few days ago, he hopes this young girl dies in prison. A member of the Knesset, Oren, said he would kick her face and he would hospitalise her with no restraint. He said this on national TV. And others have piled in, a very prominent journalist. You've got Little John here in the Sun, but even Little John wouldn't say British soldiers should take her around the back of the building in the dark and abuse her when there's no witnesses. But that's what Casper, a very prominent journalist in Israel, actually said. So the violence is very extreme. The injunctions to genocide are very extreme. I mean, they come from religious figures, but they also they came in the past from non-religious figures. And there's been a religiousisation of the movement for settler colonialism, but before it became very religious, it was just as violent and just as genocidal. I hope that answers your question. But
so
I think
it's not a purely religious thing. Religion
absolutely
is
not.
Just a sentiment being put on top as a kind of, what could I say, is an ideological covering maybe.
Yeah, well, I think that it changed after '67. Some people thought the Israeli victory over all the Arab states was a divine miracle, and that it was easily explicable in material terms. But a lot of people turned to Jewish messianic religion after that, and they became some of the worst Zionists. But that's a very local thing. But to come back to my thesis at the very, not mine, but at the very beginning, every religion, including Judaism, can be a vehicle for genocide, because there's genocidal texts in there. There's also, there's the equivalent of love thy neighbour as thyself, and that's the whole Torah. The rest is commentary. It's all there. The beautiful stuff is there, and the horrible stuff is there. And the horrible people take the horrible stuff and use it as a guide. The nice people take the nice stuff. So I hope that answers your question. I think as a materialist, the Communist Manifesto was used to massacre millions, to set up a slave labour camp right across the Soviet Union. And it's some sort of, it seems to be still influential. My son lives in China, and he was treated to a sermon recently by a millionaire quoting the Communist Manifesto, Hegel and so on. So these texts are still used even in a brutal dictatorship like China. So I think atheist texts, or texts which I strongly admire, can be perverted in order to oppress and exploit large numbers of people. And they can be Marxist texts, as we know, or they can be religious texts. I'm still a Marxist. I'm not equating the two as an understanding of history.
Excellent end joke.
Sorry. I find the discussion tonight is very, very similar to the discussion that we had on Christianity, because we were saying kind of the same kind of things. I mean, I remember saying at that meeting, my view of religion is that there's two aspects. There's the spiritual side, which is the individual that you were talking about earlier, Mick, as well. You know, the individual, you know, you're genuinely a good person, you know, regardless of what kind of religious box you have to fit into. But then there's the religious institutions, and for me, they're the ones that corrupt religion. They're the ones who are in cahoots with the government. Have been since Roman days. Religion and governance seems to has worked hand in hand, and they're the ones who tend to put forward their ideas as part of the laws, and the government takes them up and imposes them. And that's what I think that's what worries people about the Sharia law thing, you know, that we're talking about. Sam, you maybe come in on that again, because I thought there was quite a similarity between the two. But I think the important point for me over the two meetings and the two speeches here is the fact that religion has been used as a weapon of governments to divide. I mean, I always wondered, it puzzled me for years and years and years, why my grandfather was the chairman of the Communist Party in Celtic, and at the same time he was the chairman of the Orange Lodge. I thought, this is a contradiction. You know, but he had died, so I couldn't ask him. You know, I thought, you know, there's something wrong. As it was, he also had a great propensity for drinking whiskey, and I put it into that for a long time. But then I found out that the coal owners, he was a miner, and the coal owners brought a lot of Irish labour after the famine. They brought them into the mines to undermine the blossoming or developing union amongst the miners. They want to keep the miners down. And so, and what we have in Scotland, in the coalfields in Scotland, you'll notice, it's not so much now, but up until recently, there are like villages that are side by side, and one was a Catholic village, and one was a Protestant village. You know, there's two in Stirling. One is Plain, and I can never remember what the other one is. But they used to call one little Belfast and the other one little Dublin. You know, it's kind of irony, you know. But and that was a completely deliberate ploy. But the unfortunate thing, and it was a point that Mick made as well, is that people took the religious point of view rather than take a political point of view at the time, rather than being able to see for themselves that they were being split, that these were just starving workers the same as they were. They saw it as being an imposition of the Catholic Church on this pretty strong Protestant religion that they had in the minds in those days. And so I think, you know, now that Muslims are being treated exactly the same as the Irish were, as Mick pointed out, exactly the same as the West Indians were in the 60s, so as the Jews were. You know, even when you look back, Shakespeare, his villains was Jews. You know, Shylock, Charles Dickens, the villain is a Jew, Fagin. You know, and it's right through history they've taken certain minority groups and demonised them and put people against them. And what bothers me and kind of confuses me is how we let them get away with it time after time after time. So I'd like to know what you think about that, Mick, and also you, Sam, about the Sharia law.
Excellent. Well, Bill, you've got stuff to add first.
Aye.
I'll get closing statements to you guys.
Aye, thanks. I mean, adding on to Mick's response to John there about ultra-religious Jews and Zionism. And it's ironic that actually, like Naturai Kata, you've spoken about before, Mick, who's a group of ultra-Orthodox rabbis, both in Israel and outside Israel. And these guys actually look at the Old Testament, the Torah as they call it, And they said, well, actually, in our opinion, our holy book prohibits Zionism, and it's actually against the teachings of God. So when you get these guys who really are ultra-Jewish, if you want to use that terminology, they oppose Zionism, they oppose the occupation. And also there's a lot of the Orthodox Jews within Israel who, because they are so hyper-religious, are exempted from national service, which means they're then exempted from militarily oppressing and maintaining the occupation. So I do hear this a lot in street stalls and so forth. People have the opinion that it's the ultra-Orthodox Jewish community which is most responsible for the occupation. But there's two significant groups which actually either oppose it or just duck out of it altogether. On the idea of, and Jock's come back to it yet again, you know, the last presentation I did one about Christianity and socialism, and it was basically talking about, it was all touchy-feely, it was very nice. It was a nice bits of Christianity, and how Christianity does not conflict with socialism or vice versa. And I've subsequently written another presentation which I'll put up on YouTube shortly. And it's all the bad bits of Christianity, and the reason for that is it's a response to a recent video by Jada Franson, who says Islam is a religion of violence because there's violent verses in the Quran. You touched on this, Mick. There's incredible stuff, incredible genocide and commands to slaughter every baby and burn their bones to ash within the Bible. So that's just an illustration that you can, from his one book, either take a lovely, touchy-feely, happy, magic roundabout religion, or you can use it to excuse absolutely anything.
It seems like all religious texts are open to interpretation.
I think so. Rape, slavery, genocide, killing babies, absolutely no problem. It is the Christian thing to do, if that's the verses you want to look at.
It's like he said, people are just taking from it what they will, and to suit their own ends.
Absolutely. Perfect. Sam, my friend, if you want to give something a close.
Making more a religious stance and a political stance. I'm not sure if the comrades in the room will be made aware of it, but a lot of the Catholic Church, being the old Labour hardstyle they were, priests up in Cambuslang and Cumbernauld and Coatbridge who were openly preaching for people to vote Labour and vote no. Now, I'd like to see where that is in the Bible or such like, because I've clearly missed that passage. I think it took more an interest in school, if that's what was taught in the Bible, but certainly it's seen, my personal opinion, as it is a means to control. There's always been something there to divide and conquer, whether it be the rich and the poor. There's always a blame game. And when it comes down to religion, there is always, you want to blame someone. So I understand for many, it's a coping mechanism. Whatever turns you to find that faith. My uncle, alcoholic, found God, and now God's the best thing on earth. But at the end of the day, it's been a coping mechanism, but it's in no way better his life. He's still in the same situation, but he just believes in a whole different picture.
Is he off the drink then, son?
One of these gods.
Sliver. So, it's as much as it's been a good thing, it's not, he's still in the same situation, he's still in the same hardship, there's no more money in his pocket. He'd have been better out fighting for socialism like exactly the way that we have. I'd rather spend my Sunday morning up early, going and fighting against the Tories, or going, rather than reading a book. We can read a book at any time, we all take from it what we want, as Mick said, but at the end of the day, it's not going to change the world, because that's what's happened in the past, so to say. Let's move to the future.
Absolutely. Just on that, I've got a really similar sort of story where I had an uncle who, a great uncle, sadly passed away, and he had issues with alcohol. I never knew him when he was going through sort of the worst of his issues. I only knew him when after he found God. And so for my entire life, I knew this heavily religious uncle who was one of the kindest and most dedicated socialists I've ever met in my entire life. I just remember pretty much every time I met him, he would reach his hands in his pocket with some dog-eared copy, some socialist literature for me to read through, and it was because he found religion that he was able to do that.
Could I just say that if you're an alcoholic, what you're told to do is find a higher power, and a lot of people go to God because God is the highest power.
Yeah.
That's what helps them along. I think the only thing that will help us here on earth is for a spaceship to land and say, you should all be socialists.
Yeah.
Right, please.
Is it okay if I come in? Just, what is faith? Well, you see, I don't have faith in a God. I don't believe in a God. What I do have faith in is human beings. I have a great, because I'm a Marxist, I believe that we can actually change things. Now, a lot of people would guffaw at that. They believe in a God, which for me there is no evidence of. But they would guffaw about the way that people can change things. People can change things, in my view. That's not a faith-based view. It is an evidence-based view because I see it happening. I can think things can change for the worse, but they can also change for the better. Just briefly, Sam, you wanted to know about the miners' strike. If there are two lovely little films, which you probably have seen. One is Billy Elliot and the other one is Pride.
Oh, yeah.
If you want to get the feel of the time and how British society did start to change its views about gay people in particular. Yeah, that's where it started, because when people were organising, when they were struggling together, that's when the ideas started to change.
There's also a film called The Happy Lands with the earlier miners' strike.
Yeah.
It was filmed in Fife entirely with Fife actors, and it's about the city Fifers doing a brilliant piece.
We don't understand it.
Subtitles.
It does have subtitles. And Mick,
A few notes, a few random, more or less random thoughts. I'm just thinking, you mentioned the Orange Order, and my mind goes back to James Larkin, and a great socialist organiser in Ireland, and the common fight that lasted for a brief period of time, but the independent Orange Order split from the Orange Order and aligned with Larkin, aligned with radical syndicalism for a period of time. Life is funny, and people with religious ideas and even traditions that look impenetrably reactionary, interesting things can happen. I mean, American Catholic families have the same size of family as other American families, right? They don't obey what the Pope says about contraception. They plan their families like anybody else. They go to church on a Sunday and then they live their life sensibly in between. And that means they don't descend into poverty, they plan their families, they support the idea of divorce, and many of them support women's right to termination when needed. So people can carry this split consciousness. It's extreme in the case of your grandfather. People do it all the time. I mean, the film Pride, by the way, is one of the most joyous, realistic, harsh films you'll see. It's not rose-coloured spectacles. It's the hard life of being a socialist organiser and bridging the gap and creating something really tremendous, leaving a legacy. If you haven't seen it, you're lucky, because you still have that joy in front of you. You should watch it and recommend it to everybody else. And you know, Catholics have General Franco, who had the cross and he slaughtered workers in every city and town and village that he went. But you have liberation theology in Central and South America and beyond in the 70s and 80s until I forget which pope it was really crushed it. And you've got, you know, Jesus Christ and Che Guevara on the altar in many churches in Salvador and Guatemala and elsewhere. People have to use what's accessible to them. If you grow up your whole life and you never meet a socialist and you've never heard of the Communist Manifesto, right? You'll try and make sense of the world that you're in, and you'll take what there is to hand. I'll tell. I mean, when I was 16, I went to Pollock Library, and I'd read about it in some paper or something. I filled in a wee form to get a copy of Das Kapital. And he said, come back in 2 weeks, son. I came back in 2 weeks, and she gave me this book. It was entirely in old German. So I said, I said, thank you very much. And I took it home for 3 weeks and then brought it back. I wasn't able to access the ideas in that book. People will use what they have if they can't find higher ideas, if they can't find socialist ideas, scientific ideas that make sense of the world. It depends who you meet. So, in conclusion, I would say, I'd recommend that people read that great little book, The Meek and the Militant. I think it's a brilliant explanation from a Marxist point of view of the role of religion in social life, both in the ancient world and in the modern world as well. But from today, let's go forward, let's struggle. Atheists are not necessarily our friends, religious people are absolutely not necessarily our enemies. It depends on how the ideas that they've synthesised as an individual, how they come out in favour of emancipation or for oppression.
Thanks very much.
Because I have such a sense of fairness, justice, what I feel. And I believe that obviously religion manipulates everybody and that we're all human beings and it's your survival instinct to maybe see the worst in somebody. That's the thing that you deal with, how to cope. I want to know how to, I came here hoping that somebody could tell me, how do I change in general that racist attitude towards Muslims? I always try to, like on Facebook, if I put something up, I always try to counteract what racist rhetoric they're throwing at me. So they might tell me something about Muslims are all paedophiles and they sleep with her and I ask where they get and I try to put them straight on the knowledge I have. But how do I change that person's belief? Because people the people I know that have got these racist values are friends of mine, and it's only a small part of who they are. They're genuinely good people, but I don't know how to go about because they latch on anything their pal tells them. They're really quite lazy actually, because they'll not read about anything, do you know what I mean? But they're all experts in everything. And I'm like, how on earth do I stop them from doing that? Why do you believe this pish that your government's telling you? Why is this? Do you know, how can I stop that? Because they increasingly lie. I'm an SNP supporter, but what they've done to Corbyn, they've actually made him out to be a traitor to his country. It's an absolute disgrace that they're allowed, the Conservatives are allowed to get away with this. And do you know what I mean? And it's funneled through the television, so it must be true. I want to know, how do I change that pair? How
Absolutely. Sam, you seem to have a couple ideas.
In terms of questioning when they say that all Muslims are paedophiles, well, my simple reply to them would be, well, Jimmy Savile all his pals Muslims.
That's
no,
my
you just remember that.
Oh that's what I say, that I always counteract it. I mean, what can I say to that? Do you know what I mean? Oh, it's written in their teachings. No, it's not. And you'll find that not long ago, maybe 300 years down the line, just in the line, we had a queen that was married off at 3 and had been divorced and had babies by the time she was 12. And there's so much that aristocracy, I could hit that every time back. But my point is, I could speak to him blue in the face to every person. I would like to have something that I could come back with that doesn't have to go on. I'm sick of saying, do you know what divide and conquer is? Do you know how many times does the same thing he'd said? I just can't seem to. I mean, I can answer the things that they have to say back.
It's getting it through to them.
Why do you just jump on that bandwagon? I mean, my lass is sitting in my house plant and I just hate them, back. I was like, why are you, and she's no longer my friend, but what are you doing and what are you saying and what's going on there?
I would think, I've never worked in medicine, but you triage, don't you? This one's dead, nothing you can do, this one's badly wounded, walking wounded. I think some people, there's no point wasting your time on somebody that's absolutely determined to fight off everything you're saying. They're impervious to reason. The only response I make is, next, let's go and talk to somebody else. But so seek out the people you can talk to. I mean, Romeo and Juliet. You know, directors today have a problem when they're doing a Romeo and Juliet play. I think Juliet was 13 or something, or 14. So do they have a 14-year-old actress today playing, whoa, that's a bit sinister, a bit creepy. But no, that was, so I think to talk about sexual mores in different societies at different times, even in the world today, I think there's some US states.
Oh, that's just one example. Yeah. Well, I've held that out to them. I know they even crossed them in the line when as young as 11. I'm like, how can you? And then I seen a young girl absolutely floods of tears over the moon that she got herself at AK, whatever, they smashed somebody. I'm like, and you say that other people are radicalised? I think that's what
something tells me that you're no something tells me that we shouldn't be giving you advice. I bet you're fighting the good fight. I think you're giving it plenty. I think we should be listening to what you're doing.
What am I? I can answer all these things back, but if I can't penetrate into somebody's skull, and like I say, it's just, some people are really good people. And I feel, and I say to them, you're letting my class down with being so thick and stupid. It's got to the point where I've stopped being polite. I don't want to be impolite.
Well, first of all, you have to save yourself. First of all, if you're swimming in a sewer, you want to stay clean yourself. And these sewage ideas do come from the sun and the star and all these rags. And we are all swimming in a sewer. So first of all, you've got to get together with other socialists. That's the first thing. Keep your sanity. Even two of you is better than you on your own. So the two of you can, you can do a therapy session together, and then you can plan to go back out again. So I think there's many people like your good self. They're fighting the fight. They're trying to stave off this tsunami of horrible racism.
Yeah, because it's worse now since Trump came about. It's like it's okay. It's like they're all coming out good ones.
I would say
they're proud to be racist. Absolutely adamant about it.
It's acceptable.
Yeah. I think you've got to join these guys.
Mick said to me one time, I once stood for election, I got 16 votes or something, and I was really pissed off. And Mick says to me, he said, Bill, even though you don't seem to be making any progress whatsoever, wherever you go, you leave a footprint. Right. So the situation where you feel that you're just surrounded by numpties and racists and Trumpists, you know, your efforts will be having an effect, but you won't necessarily see it.
I think that's what it is. It's a total train.
Don't wear yourself out. Don't wear yourself out. You need your energy. I think Mike's right. You need your energy to be focused. I have a personal rule, which is I never bother to engage with a racist unless other people are listening. It's the other people that matter.
What we'll do is, I know we've got a couple of hands raised, but I know Mick has to go, so Mick, let you say.
I was looking at one of the organisers in the East End of London in the 30s, Wal Hannington, and they organised among working class people in the East End of London, and some of these families in sections and streets were culturally, they were British Union of Fascists. So they were fascists, they hated Jews at that time, and they were part of Mosley's. Mosley was a big rising star, you know, he was a big thing in British politics at that time, before they were smashed. But Hannington and the left, they organised with these workers, and he describes a situation, they get into somebody's house who's getting evicted. He's a member of the British Union of Fascists. The water's streaming down the walls of his house, he's living in horrible conditions, right? And he's taking it out on Jews, he thinks Jews are to blame for his condition. But these guys organised with him. They said, okay, we'll fight the landlord, we will not allow you to be evicted. And by doing that, a lot of these people opened up, and they began to question their certainties. They said, well, these people are helping me. The people who are denouncing the Jews, they're not here helping me. These leftists are coming down here to help me defend my house. And I think it's important to distinguish between hardcore fascists. I've only got one conviction for assault in my long life, and that's for punching John Tyndall. My only conviction for us, he deserves a punch and a kick. But there's other people who... I saw a guy on TV, he was an organiser with the Anti-Nazi League, and he described how who's the British comedian? One of the Shrewsbury Three.
Oh, the Royal Family.
Ah, the Royal Family.
Ricky
Tomlinson. Ricky Tomlinson used to be a fascist. Ricky Tomlinson used to be very influenced by the National Front, but when they were out on strike as a building worker in North Wales, Ricky, if I get not Ken, anyway, the guys he was on strike with challenged them. We're striking together, we're fighting for better wages, you're one of us, right? But, come on, Ricky, what's this shite you're talking, right? And Des Warren and other people took him to task and prized him away from that. And I remember on television, I saw a guy, I was in the Middle East at the time, and the BBC TV ran this guy for half an hour. He was a full-time worker with the Anti-Nazi League. He had been in the National Front. He'd been in the National Front. And he described how he was working in this office. And a black guy got a job in the office, and he said to the black guy, it's amazing how these wee things happen. He said to the black guy, oh, you're alright, I like you. I don't like black people. He says, but you're alright. And the black guy didn't punch him. The black guy didn't go mental. He said, well look, if you like me, then you don't dislike black people. Look, if you don't like black people, then you can't like me. And the guy went home and his mental view collapsed. He just said, what have I been saying all these years? This guy is nice to me. He's challenging my view, but he's not going off his head. So I think you have to triage. I think with your friends and with everybody you meet, you say, beyond hope. For now. They might change in the future, but for now, let's find the people that would, that would
I
make
think the
more
real change will come when the NHS falls. That's when people's views will change, but there's nothing job has to come of that.
Thank you very much.
Of course, thanks very much for coming.
Can I leave some stuff here, guys?
Yes.